Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I am very honored to be here. I think what we're going to do is we're going to just talk a bit about ourselves, introduce ourselves, right? And then I think we want this to be a conversation. Liz and I, we talked a bit about the pieces of the whole work last week. And so we're going to continue to refer to this conversation I think that we had. And my name is Karina Hodoyan, and I'm a professor at the University of San Francisco. I was previously the director of the Master's in Migration Studies, and I also teach Latina and Chicana literature and culture at the university. And I'm also a film producer with my partner, Japan Films here in Oakland. And I do a lot of work with Latina content. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here and to be in the role that you created. So thank you for inviting me to this conversation, and I know that you want to introduce yourself too.
Thank you so much, Karina. And thank you everyone for being here. There's so many people. I'm like shocked. Thank you for being here. My name is Liz Hernández, and I'm an artist from Mexico, living in Oakland for almost a decade now. I think over a decade at this point. And I was very excited when my good friend Giovanna Venegas introduced me to Karina, because I felt like I didn't really know who would be the right person to engage in this conversation. And we, as Karina mentioned, we had a Zoom talk, and I feel like we really connected in many ways. And at the end of that conversation, I was like, wow, I found someone who like understands me, but also offered so much for me to continue this like investigation and this like the things that interest me in my art practice. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone here.
So I think I have maybe 4 or 5 questions, and then I can open it up to the public if anybody else wants to also ask questions. And so anyway, so we'll begin. I first encountered Liz's work at MoMA, right, when we saw the mural that's the red and black ink, inviting the viewers to come in and join into a shared, almost communal experience of healing, of the world, of politics. And so when I first encountered this particular piece, I thought a lot about history. In particular, I thought about the role of art in evoking a sense of history, a sense of living in history now. And I mentioned a couple of people to you. Norma Larcón always said, we always have to consider art as if it's facing the past and being pushed into the future, or it's actually just looking at the possibilities of the future and ignoring the past. And so what I felt when I looked at your work, I thought about Paul Klee's The Angel of History. And Walter Benjamin talks about an angel that's just staring at what progress has destroyed. It's almost being propelled into the past in shock as to what the progress in history has actually created and pushed him into the future, I'm sorry. And so I felt that your work brings those pieces together that have been fragmented by history, what we call progress, and brought them together into a world that is unique and is yours, right? So one of the questions that I had was, could you talk a little bit about the relationship of this piece to history and to the past?
Yes. When you explained to me what progress was, and just like Walter Benjamin's idea of history, for a moment, I guess I just didn't really think about what I was doing as putting those pieces together, at least maybe not like I wasn't super aware of it. And I realized that I think, a lot of what I was trying to do is like look at the past and like use the language of history of like, history, I think it speaks in terms of like evidence, like physical evidence, facts, documents, to kind of validate the existence of things. But at the same time, I wanted to like look at the future. So I think in this case, it's a little bit of both. It's like, yes, looking at the past, the things that has happened, but also introducing a little bit of like the possibilities that maybe the future brings. So I made just a few notes, and earlier today there was a group of really nice students, and I explained to them that I felt like by appropriating the language of history, because like so many things in history are like actually made up. They're like lies. You could in some way create your own, and you never know what could happen. It could become real. So with a theme like this, which I'm not sure if it's really obvious to people, but it's femicide in Mexico, I just wanted to be able to think of a different world where the possibility of justice was actually an option. Does that answer?
Yes, and it takes me to other questions that I have, because I did have a sense of a preoccupation, obviously, with gathering evidence and not creating, but invoking pieces from the past that have been lost or are not physically present with us, right? And for me, it reminded me of sometimes why some communities, disenfranchised communities, actually have to prove themselves in many ways. You know, they have to prove that they're citizens, have to prove their humanity, have to prove show their papers. And so you do a very interesting thing with evidence. So I was wondering if you could talk a little about that. What role does evidence play also in this work?
Yeah, I think we talked about it really briefly, but I've always been really intrigued by anthropology, and I really kind of grew up going to not a lot of like art galleries, but a lot of archaeological sites just through school. I think it was kind of required, going through like museums like of different cultures. And I always thought it was interesting how all these little bits and pieces were shown together and kind of explained, this is the story of this people. And just by seeing that, I was like kind of taking note of like the little bits of pieces that make up a place. So I just tried to recreate that by, considering different materials, different ways of expressing like one's history, and just bringing them together suddenly, because there's so many voices kind of in the materials, but also by collaborating with a lot of like some friends and even family members, suddenly it was just not like the Liz Hernández show. It was like many voices coming together, and I'm just kind of helping, creating this space where they kind of tell the same story. So I was just observing, and again, using that language of history to tell a different one.
And one of the things that came up as well was the word retrieval or invocation a lot in what you were doing. And for me, it was in many ways a retrieval of knowledge that has been lost. I know that you actually learned how to
Embroidery?
Yes, and then also you learned Nahuatl as well. So it was a lot of invoking and retrieving that which has been lost in many ways in our knowledge and our way of living, of the everyday. And also a loss of people, as what you said, it's a loss of women. And then how do we bring them back? How do we find a space, as you said, of grieving, but also of celebration in many ways as well, like for the lives of who they are. Mm-hmm. Could you talk? For me, can you talk a bit about those pieces? There's a story that I'm really interested in, the hand that you found.
Oh, yeah.
Could you
of course.
talk about that?
If you go to the vitrine, you will see clay, like a piece of a hand that's clay, and it's painted with purple. And that's actually a really old ceramic piece that broke in the kiln. It's one of the first ceramic pieces that I made, so of course it exploded. And I just was holding onto this hand for many years. Actually, I just put it in a pot because I thought it was really funny that it was like sticking out, and it was a little creepy. And I forgot about it, and I was working in the show, and I took it out because I was watering my plant, and I saw it, and it had grown a lot of mold, and I just thought, oh, I'm digging this out, and it just felt so related to the show. And I decided to paint the flowers because in my process of retrieving, of like collecting this, it was like almost like what do you call it? Like in anthropology, you start digging and you find all these pieces together. I felt like it was a moment that was similar to it, and I thought, what tells us when we see just a piece of something, I feel like our minds start kind of making up the rest of the information that's missing from this chunk. So I thought that by seeing it like that, maybe there was at some point in our fictitious town a big sculpture of a woman covered in flowers, and I thought like maybe someone destroyed it. And why? Why was it destroyed? Is it too uncomfortable to have this kind of like landmark? Would it validate this like idea that like these like women spirits exist? So I think it was better to destroy it, and someone maybe held into a piece, and then we got it discovered. So it tells a story by just, you know, having enough information missing. Yeah, it was also pure luck, I think.
No, and again, it's retrieving those pieces, right, that are part of your own ritual as an artist, as a creator, as someone evoking the past. And the other retrieval, I felt, was the memory and the beliefs and the stories and the myths of others. So,
Oh yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, it was. I think that's probably why I get so emotional when I talk about the show, because I told Karina that I had to like listen to so many testimonies, like very real ones, and it hurt me. Sorry. So what I was doing was just kind of hearing people talk about their stories and putting them together and kind of like seeing the things connecting them, and being able to make a story based on that was just so hard. But at the same time, I remember this woman who very clearly said that if we keep thinking about femicide in Mexico as just numbers, as just data, as like another thing in the news, it was not going to change, because it would only change if you put in the shoes of the person who's gone through it, and if you were able to kind of like have that emotional response, that empathy, it would change. That we would all be like, we need to do something about it. And I feel like I really needed to understand like how that feels to like lose someone like this and want to find justice like so bad. I think that's why I became obsessed with the show, because I was like, there has to be a way to be able to claim that justice, and it is in the world of like dreams, or in this case like a myth or a legend. So I think that's why I became so obsessed with making up this world.
Yes, and I think it brings us back to what I envisioned. You are the shaman, or you are that angel of history that brings together all the fragments that have been destroyed by this that we call progress, by the violence of history in many ways. And how do you bring those pieces together? How do you connect them? And I saw also that you used stories and letters. Could you tell us about, because the stories and letters that also evoke other times,
right,
and other beliefs, and it's also community, right? The community also collaborated in many ways in this.
Yeah, absolutely. The ones from Live Dream. Yeah, so that's another thing. When I was working on the show, I just was like, why would I be trying to speak about something so hard alone if this is like a very communal issue? And I thought about like the strongest kind of like people I know, which is just like so many of the women in my family. My family is very matriarchal, so I see them as like the people who hold the knowledge, who hold the like power, the like all of that. So I wanted to collaborate with them, especially with my grandma, who I think my grandma, the way she views the world, just influenced my entire art practice, but also my life. So I think I told you, Karina, when a legend or like anything in Mexico needs to be, or like a way to show that it has been so like ingrained in society is by it being kind of mixed with Catholicism, like that syncretism, that like mixture of different beliefs and religions coming together. It's something that fascinates me. So I thought it would be interesting to bring the legend of these jacarandas, these spirits, protector spirits for women, to be merged with the world of Catholicism. And my family is kind of religious, but also kind of, there's that syncretism present too. So I asked my grandma and my aunt to make a prayer where they would mention the jacarandas, because I wanted it to be proof that this legend was so strong that it bled into the world of religion, which is interesting to me. But the main thing that was surprising was my grandma wrote a testimony. I didn't ask her to do that, but she went ahead and almost kind of wrote a real testimony where she states her name, when she was born, and she goes on to explain that the spirits of the people who leave us are always like present and looking at us, and that they make themselves present in really small ways, like a butterfly. I think she mentions a hummingbird, little birds, just because they want to feel close to us. And I realized that that's kind of the thought that inspired this entire exhibition. Then she goes on to say that the jacarandas are the spirits of these women because they want to know what happened to them. They want to know why, and they come back and they make themselves present. And I thought that was so amazing because I mentioned it to you, Karina, that a lot of these women don't have ways to make justice for themselves. And one of these women in Mexico who has become an activist for stopping femicide and fighting for her own daughter said that sometimes the only way these women can defend themselves is by their bodies being found. So I really wanted these shapes, these women who come back, to be shown by their bodies, but their bodies have been transformed. They're not violated. They're just transformed into this beautiful cloud of flowers.
And that was also led us to a conversation of what I see as arts as magic. I mean, and the capacity of art to really create a world where we can inhabit it, right? That we can be part of. And this particular piece of work, more than anything, felt very tender. And there's a feeling of a lot of beauty and a lot of tenderness and a very embracing to create a space where we can not only also enjoy all the women on that little hill, but also can be with them.
Yes.
And so I was just interested in and now that this whole world is here, what does it evoke for you in terms of what is the role of art for you in general terms as well?
Yeah. Well, just to address the kind of the first part, yeah, it is true. To me, it has been such kind of healing to have this world exist. After listening to so many reading and listening to so many really awful kind of unthinkable. I think you used the word unthinkable, and I really appreciated that word. I thought about how to speak about it, and I don't really care about depicting any dramatic things, any violent things, and I thought that it really needed to come from a place of bliss and beauty and that tenderness, that caring, but still rooted in reality. So I think that this exhibition really offered me that healing space where I was able to have conversations with the people involved in the exhibition, my family. My mom made this dress with me. My friend Estefania helped me write the document. My aunt is part of this film that I collaborated with Cesar, and it just offered a place of community. It is that, a place where we could all gather and speak about a very hard thing that maybe we don't speak in our everyday lives. And I guess the role of art in my life, and of course every art practice is different, but personally I think I've always thought about it as there's no division between art and everyday life, and art in our spaces, our houses, our kitchens. I think I really try in my house to be surrounded by these objects that in my mind hold a lot of magic and power, simply because that's how I experience maybe in Mexico I just experienced art being part of it, and just even having religious art inside of the house. I didn't really experience art in a gallery. It was always either on the archaeological site that's outside, or of course like the archaeology museum, but also like in my grandma's like altar, in my just like the ceramics that we would like get from visiting other states. Like it was always just like no division, and these things hold a lot of magic and power, and the stories of many people, not just one.
I was very inspired by it, and I shared with you a piece by Ainoan Sanduano, who's a writer, and talks a lot about the power of ink, of colors, right, to represent wisdom or to represent rationality. And you have a lot of color in all your work, not only here, but I've seen the work that you've done on the streets with the bright pink that calls us into, invites us to come in and join, the space, as I said, as part of a community, as a shared experience, a shared feeling, a shared history. Can you talk a little bit about the color as well and what that means to you?
Absolutely. I think the pink is another good example of like what I try to do here with the purple. I think even color has history, and color, the way color is perceived, changes with context and the people like looking at it. And for me, purple really is like inspired by the jacarandas, the jacaranda flower that to me speaks of where I come from. This like tree that lines the streets of like Mexico City, and just has like that kind of, it takes me to like a place of memory of like walking with my grandpa and like kind of pressing the jacaranda flowers and making like a little like sound, and it takes me to a place of like, to this specific place. But also in the last 5 years, I would say the color has been really taken by a lot of groups of women who are fighting for their right to live free in Mexico. So it's a symbol of that fight. So I thought it was really interesting that those things could exist just in a specific shade of purple, because it's not just any shade of purple. And as you can see, it's like present everywhere. It's like from the paint, from my thread and the embroideries, from the felt used on the pocket altars that are in the vitrine, but also the typeface outside, and the typeface and the subtitles of the short film. So it's a very small kind of detail, but to me it really connects everything, and it speaks of, like I hope that maybe you enjoy it, and it's like a color that's like peaceful too. But for example, when I showed it to like my mom, she was like, oh, my mom and my dad, which I really hope that they're watching this, my dad said, oh, it's like the feminists, right? And I like that my dad, who maybe is like not really into that conversation, was able to like understand it. So I really love that he was able to get it just through color.
I don't know what time. I think we're good right now. But if you would like, what would you like people who witness this world come out of with? What would be your biggest interest in terms of the experience that you offer of this world? And I want to say it because I wrote it down. Pancho Chichobislan.
Ooh, okay. ¿Lo puedo decir?
Yeah.
Okay, so the name of the town, I actually had the name in Spanish, which in Spanish is donde las flores moradas lloran, in English is where the purple flowers cry. And I really wanted it to be translated into Nahuatl because a lot of neighborhoods in Mexico retain or like still have their name in Nahuatl. It's not like rare, like where I lived, it had a name in Nahuatl and I knew what it meant. The names often talk about like the place, the flora, and maybe even the economic activities of a place. So I thought in this made up fictitious town that the flowers were so sad about what was going on that they just had to like cry, and that it was so ingrained in the place that the name even reflected that sadness. So the place is called Camochpal Xochi Choquistlan, which I had to take a class because I guess we all in Mexico butcher Nahuatl really bad. So Camochpal Xochi Choquistlan. And it's a beautiful language too. I think it's very poetic. It sounds like the sound is very important. yeah, so that's the name of the town. I even forgot what you asked.
Oh no, and I think it's just connected to that you're also inviting us to
yes,
be part of this world, right? And I think my sense, and this is me just witnessing all of your work, it's always an invitation,
Yes.
to be part of, I would say, almost like a communal experience or communal feeling or communal grieving.
Yeah, totally.
And so, what would you like people to get from coming into this world that you created?
Oof, that's so hard because like I wish so many things, but what could it be? You know, my friend Valeria Mata, who wrote the very beautiful text that accompanies the exhibition, an observation that she made was that by having a legend, or like in this case, this like world, we suddenly are contemporaries to all these like people. So I think my goal is that people get so immersed in the town that suddenly they feel like they know it, that they understand what people are going through because they read the testimony and thread. They can read the letter. They can see like the impact that these spirits had to the point where they need to be like portrayed in metal, and also to kind of empathize, maybe to like understand like that, I don't know, that like pain too. I know it doesn't change anything, but I don't know. I just like really remember that testimony that the mom of this woman that was murdered said that she just really wished that people felt like it was their problem too, and not just like, oh, these women who are like going out late at night or like being promiscuous or being like bad women, that it was like their fault. Like it's all our problem, and we should all kind of like, at least maybe in Mexico, we should all be just kind of like, we need to do something about it because it matters to us. So that's kind of what I was trying to do, that you enter this world, you know, because I was thinking if I just put a lot of like numbers and data of like, this is 10 women in Mexico that murder every day, like it's so much easier to just like turn the page, and suddenly here in this world you're so immersed and you're already kind of like invested that then you realize, oh, we're talking about this thing that I didn't know. So I guess that's just my hope, that it invites you so much that then you engage in like the real issue, the based in reality. Yep.
I don't know if you want to open it up for questions from the audience, and then great answer if there's any questions. But yes.
So the work makes me think about how all cultures, Judaism, Muslim, whatever, the onus is always on the woman to be less, to be covered, to not show herself. And there's never an emphasis about the male to be thinking about self-control or taking responsibility. And this work makes me think about how much has been taken away from women, with that in every culture of always worrying that the onus is on us, that when we walk around in the city at night, we should be less. And that by us being less, males get more. And that's why the work with the Women on the Hill is like, we're taking this power back. We're going to make the life we want, with the smiles we want.
Yeah.
We want to drink or smoke or whatever we want to do. Walk around naked. That should be we should be allowed that by our cultures. And there's no culture that I can think of that allows that. It's always the onus. And that's me. It's really, it's going to take women somehow taking that power back to say, look, it isn't my problem that I make you feel the way I make you feel.
Yes, and I think we had a conversation. I'm glad you mentioned it, because we actually had a very long conversation about that beautiful sculpture in the back. And I think it's very connected to what you're talking about. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's yeah, I think it really relates to like the bigger idea of the show where like women just reclaim power. That piece, it's this small mountain where at the very top the women are able to like convene. They come together, they're all naked, they're like resting, they're drinking beer, they're smoking cigarettes, they're doing all the things that like women get often kind of like just made feel bad about doing that. And it's just so funny because in Mexico, I feel like there's an understanding that at the top of the mountains, at the top of the cerros, like women, the witches live there, and they do all the bad things there. And like if you go as a kid, they will eat you, and it's a place that's dangerous. And I was like, what a perfect place for the women to be able to be safe, where it's like dangerous to go there. And like it just made me understand like women who are like sure of themselves, who do all the things, who like are constantly defying kind of like maleness or machismo in this case, they're so scary. And I just wanted actually all these women to be like terrifying, so like no one would like mess up with them. That's why you see some of the figures on the right that are like tall. I wanted them to be like tall and like look at you and just be kind of like defying you. Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that, because yeah, that was the purpose of that piece, of them being free, being in control and not afraid anymore. Any other questions?
But there is a place like that in Oaxaca, Juchitán, right?
I think so.
Yeah, it's run by women.
Open.
The Muchas.
Juchitán,
It's a matriarchy.
A matriarchy, yes. It's a different...
And the Muchas live there.
Yeah.
Yes.
The funny part about it is that maybe I was very lucky, and I don't want to like generalize, but in my upbringing, women have always had the power. They've been like the people running everything. So, you know, then I realized that I was just very lucky and that a lot of people don't have that privilege. But I've always seen like Mexico's a matriarchal society where like women are expected to like feed people, take care of everyone, be like the people keeping the culture alive, be storytellers, be all these things, and suddenly men are just to be served. I'm like, what? It doesn't make any sense. And yeah, to me, they're like the people who hold the power, the knowledge, and like they're like the shamans in my brain.
Yeah, and I feel that that's the bringing together of maybe the religious, but also the secular, of the imagined and then the real everyday, that you bring together. And I saw it also in this. If you have a chance, you haven't had a chance to see the video, I think it's also another part of the evidence and documentation of this world, and also this, where they go, so these women that are walking the streets and they're still very much part of the now, right? And would you like to talk a little bit about the piece and also the dress as well?
Yeah, that would be great. First, I just want to thank my mom, who's probably watching this, because she really made that dress. I came up to her and I was like, hey, I have this idea, and I wasn't asking her for help. I just told her, oh my God, I have so much work. And she offered herself, and she was like, I want to help you do this because I believe that that's like a beautiful idea. So it was very kind of inspired in like ritual, and throughout many cultures and states in Mexico, there's a lot of rituals and their costumes that people wear, just like the rituals for anything. But in the world of Santa Maria Camopachuchitla, which is the like colonial name of the place, the little girls would all wear these like dresses and dance for one day. And I just felt like just imagining that was like enough for me to want to make this. I was obsessed with it, and my mom said, I'll help you. So we worked together. She like would send me pictures of like the progress of the dress, and to me it's so special because she also wrote down some thoughts. After she made the dress, I asked her, well, what do you think about it? And she said that she understood the dress as each flower being like a woman, and they all coming together and making this like barrier of protection who would protect this like person wearing it. And I thought it was beautiful that she even engaged in that kind of like thought process while just putting flowers. But if we talk a little bit about the the film, it was a collaboration with my friend Cesar. Cesar is, he was born in Sonora, and he lives in Mexico City now, and I just really liked his work because I was a little afraid that if it was just my film, it would be too, maybe a little too beautiful, too like just showing this person walking around. And I wanted him to inject that reality because he's very real, and like I really love that about his work. So we collaborated in this together. I have to give him all credit for like directing and the cinematography. But basically the video is a parallel story to the legend that we're talking about, with the death of a flower, which is a poetic way to describe a woman dying. This parrot appears, and she is trying to understand her new reality, so she decides that she also needs to go ahead and document. So again, that documentation, that evidence is present throughout the 3 rooms. And I think it came all together. I really want to thank Carmen, who is the model. She's also an amazing artist. My aunt, who is also an actress in the film and who did such an amazing job. And Kiavet Morales, who's a poet who also participated here and collaborated. So yeah, I invite you, maybe if there's time, like we could play it for people who haven't seen it. But yeah, it was like a parallel to this world that I created. I allowed Cesar to create kind of his own version. It's like the legend of Las Jacarandas in Mexico City 2022.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think that something that really hit me about, like, from the film was that when you were speaking to the women, the things that they were afraid of were being acted upon them. And when you spoke to the men, the word abyss just kept coming up. What was it like for you to like be in conversation with the men in those spaces who were afraid of death in this disembodied way that's also reflective of, like, is it like the internal abyss that you feel like that we're talking about?
That's super interesting because, the reason why I collaborated with Cesar is because we had an interesting conversation where I was like thinking about how I had so many women participating in this exhibition and bringing our kind of like point of view and how we deal with this problem. And I had like not a guy, and also like they're the ones who are at fault. And Cesar was really like someone who spends a lot of time thinking about, like how the way that men are kind of like trained to like not feel anything, to like remove themselves from like that emotional world, really is like almost like the root of the problem of femicide, where like men just, sometimes when you hear people who like, men who killed like a woman, they're like, I was just so jealous. I was just so sad. And like, that's wild that like, they don't really know how to like control their feelings, or like, they just don't even know how to address it. And when we were out on the street, we really tried hard to talk a lot to like older men, and they just simply didn't want to. When I would tell them like, they would be like, what are the questions? And I told them, and they would be like, no, sorry. So it was really interesting to have like that guy who speaks about that emptiness, but also being afraid of being alone. And then the other extreme, that's like this guy who's like, I don't feel sad and I don't feel fear. Like, it just really kind of like spoke about the thing that we were looking for. And even, you could see like women being like, I'm afraid of men. So we just wanted to talk about those themes, but not in like a very kind of like to your face way. And I'm glad that you were able to like get a little bit of what we were trying to do.
I came through a lot, and I feel like in the work too, if we're talking about negative space, the masculine is a negative space in this work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it broke also that isolation, right? To really admit that you have a fear, or admit your sadness. Right?
Yeah, oh my God.
There's an invitation for many of them to actually, oh yes, we're all afraid, we're all feel insecure, we feel death.
Yeah, and something that was really interesting, because I was recording with Cesar, with Jesus, with Carmen. We were like 4 people together, and every time someone would say something, we would kind of chat about it. And some people, like, one thing that we all realize is that when people talk about sadness, their eyes could tell it. Like, they go to that sad place and they suddenly are transported there. And sometimes that's like, it told us more than even their words, like seeing them kind of get really sad and that fear too, it transports you to a place. They're two simple questions, but they really took people to very, very difficult places to exist. And man, sometimes they were like, oh, you could see it, I think, in that guy's face where he's like, I don't even know like how to call it. And then he finally finds like abyss. But did you mean like a hole in the ground or like complete emptiness? Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, questions. Well, and just to kind of refer also to your comment and your question, and to also repeat things that I already said before, is that it's creating spaces for people to even sometimes permit themselves to feel, to grieve, and to imagine, but also to imagine, right? I mean, there's also a lot of strength, there's power, there's magic in this world as well, for creation of a possibility, right? So just the stopping people on the street and creating that space of sharing, and also your murals that also always invite people to be part of a bigger shared experience. So I really want to thank you for the amazing work that you've done with this exhibit. If there's anything else that you would like to share, that I know that we had a long conversation, but is something else that you would like to share from the work as a way to close up the conversation?
Oh my God. I don't know. I actually don't know. It was very hard. And, you know, throughout the process of doing it, I was like, am I doing something wrong? Is this totally wrong? It just was like kind of painful. And I was like, why am I putting through this? But I just felt like that's kind of what I needed. And I realized that when I would introduce my collaborators into the exhibition, so many people were like, this is so beautiful, or like, constructing the space, like, as you said, I think at the end of the day, I didn't want it to be like, oh, it's my show. It ended up evolving into like, this is an opportunity that I have to talk to other people who are also having this in their mind and coming together and making something together. I think at the end of the day, that's something that I really appreciated. And realizing that a lot of these collaborators were already thinking about this subject, because how could you not, if it's just like ingrained in the everyday of like being a woman in Mexico. So I was just thankful to work with them, and if they're watching this, I hope they do. Like, I just want to thank them because it made me feel so happy to like be able to have someone while I was like working on this. Like, I just couldn't have done it alone, to be honest. It was really difficult. Yep.
Well,
Can I ask?
yes.
I kind of know the answer because I talked about a little bit about it, but I feel like this is the beginning of a bigger project. And so, could you talk a little bit more about like how you see this evolving or growing or expanding?
Yeah, I can see this growing. You know, if I had more time, if I had more resources, I would really like to continue building up on this like exhibition. I would like to include many other artists who, I think I maybe mentioned it to you, Giovanna. I wanted to include one artist from every single state of Mexico, because I thought that like this problem, I experienced it in one way, but when I would talk to, Estefania, I felt like in Tijuana, maybe it's a little bit different. And when I would talk to Cesar in Sonora, he would bring other things, and I just would like to create that kind of map, expand the world, not just make work myself, but actually include others making work based on this idea, and just like put together more evidence. But now we're able to kind of like even solidify this idea of the town even more. I think that would be so interesting, and just expanding to other mediums. Like, what if there's like a longer movie? I don't know. I feel like there's so much to still dig through, and it's just like, it's almost like I just found like the surface, and there's still like many like meters to like dig through. Yeah, so thank you.
and this is a question I think that so many artists are dealing sometimes with these themes. How do you represent the unthinkable without, I know, repeating the violence and symbolically, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something, I think someone earlier today during a class visit asked, or maybe it was, I don't know, but someone asked me, how do these women get revenge? And I really debated on that, and that's the reason why you don't see it, but I did have paintings that showed it, and I feel like I just need more time, because I was thinking, would these women just recreate the violence that was inflicted on them, or would their revenge be its own kind of its own kind of, I don't know, way to do it? And I think there's one piece over there which I didn't really mention too much, but to me it was them coming to this world, almost the most important thing is offering closure to their family. So I really like a painting that's over here where it's a woman that it's part of our world, but then she's holding hands with this spirit, half woman, half flower. And to me, that closure, having closure, is something so hard to get. And when someone deprives you from that, it's like torture. You're not even alive anymore. So I think maybe they don't have to recreate the same kind of violence. Maybe that's just stronger. Just being able to offer answers, to offer closure, to give the families of these people their life back. To me, maybe that's even stronger. So, yeah.
Okay. Is someone with a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to something you said about where the responsibility lies, and I'm thinking about NAFTA, and I'm thinking about Maquiladoras, and how North American companies benefited from that, to literally to the deaths of women in Mexico. And so it really is all of our responsibility. It's not just something that's happening in this isolated place, So I appreciate you just raising that and reminding us that we all have a part in what's happening there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I was so involved in just seeing it from the lens of a Mexican woman that, yeah, what you bring up is there's also some responsibility even outside of Mexico where you don't even know it, it's it's so far away that it almost doesn't exist. And it happens with so many other things too. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I think something that you mentioned too, especially when thinking about history, right? That this is not an isolated event. This is something that that existed across generations, across time,
Yes.
and also across space, right? It's not only an issue of Mexico in terms of we talk about gender violence. So I think
Absolutely.
that was
Yeah.
important to consider.
Yeah, that's kind of why, if you get a chance to read the translated version of that document that Estefania and I wrote, our assumed persona, Dr. Viviana Palacios, thinks that her document, that it's written and it's framed now, her research was so uncomfortable for the Mexican government that it had to be swept under the rug. Nothing happened here, because it would just be too shameful to accept that this has been going on since the country was created, or even earlier times. But also, when I was doing research for this, I found so many etchings, so many corridos, so many stories. We're speaking, visual arts, music, movies where there's straight up violence against women, and it was never seen as bad. So there's evidence out there. Why wouldn't this be another example of that? Yeah. One last question, or we can just stop. There's one.
So I don't know if it's a good question or not.
It's a good
But
question.
How close to really believing this world, you literally made a world from what you concepted and imagined and how it's show. And so that idea of the mystical, we can make our world. We made the world that we're in, all the things that we that came from somewhere that isn't here, and now it's here. So with this show, do you feel because we can insert history, right? These things don't exist in a certain way, and you pitch the language of an elevated space, spaces that people assume it's true. It has a big wall plaque. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These big gestures that point to I know something for sure. So with this show, you've kind of taken that language back and saying this is valid because I said so. So
Yeah.
how close to you, what does this mean to you on a very like real time, like little level, like
Yeah.
where it starts to be like, this is the real world. This is the space it takes.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. Like, I was just so, I did this every day for like a year and a half, and I would talk about it, and it's the only thing I would think about. And I think in order to believe magic, you have to be like an active participant of it. So I believe it, and God, like, I really wish that like I could see one of these like spirits like just manifest in front of me.
And as you said, no, we create our worlds in many ways, and we actually sometimes living in other people's worlds, in other people's histories, right?
Yeah.
And so it's in a gesture, in a movement, in bringing people together. You're creating a world with not only yourself, but all the other people that were also part of this on different levels, right?
Absolutely. And you know, one thing, just to kind of continue on what you said, something that happened during the opening that I loved was that someone came up to me and was like, I Googled this and I couldn't find any information about the place. And I was like, it doesn't exist. And that's amazing. Like, it is real. And, you know, when I was in Mexico with my friend Cesar, we were walking in the Centro Histórico, and he was like, should we go check out the like tile piece, the like tile with the glyph? And I was like, Cesar, what do you mean? He was like, yeah, the one that's like, that you sent me a picture. I was like, Cesar, that doesn't exist. So it's just like a proof that like, I think Karina, I told you, like, what if in 200 years something terrible happens and someone finds these pieces somehow and they get discovered as like, wow, we found the place, and suddenly this becomes like, you know, it gets like support from the Mexican government because now it's like a good time to talk about it, and they teach this in school, and now it's in the like public school books, and who knows, that could be possible. You never know. That'd be cool.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's like the perfect thought to stop at. Is that,
Yes. So, yeah. I think so.
Yeah. And again, thank you, Liz, for inviting us into this world and creating this world for all of us. And thanks, everyone, for joining us in this conversation.